The VP's heels clicked like gunfire across the polished floor of Stratwell Dynamics' downtown Chicago HQ. "Rachel, do we really need all these binders?" she asked, twirling a pink Sharpie like it was a magic wand. "Feels like you're hoarding trees." I didn't even glance up. Just slid tab 11 into place. Q3's control tests, color-coded, indexed, and cross-referenced against every exception log from the past 18 months. A small miracle of order in a place allergic to it. "They're not binders," I said evenly. "They're the backbone." Her name was Vanessa Holloway, VP of Strategy, imported from some glossy New York firm that thought slide decks and slogans could replace infrastructure. She gave a tight laugh. "No, see, we're going digital now." "Progress, right?" I smiled without warmth. "Internal control doesn't go out of style, Vanessa. Unlike Comic Sans in your last presentation." She blinked, then strutted off, muttering something about compliance dinosaurs. I'd been at Stratwell 7 years, long enough to survive 3 CEOs, 2 rebrands, and 1 near-fatal data breach that almost ended half our client contracts. Every time, it was the same story. The loud ones bragged, and I rebuilt what they broke. I wasn't flashy. Didn't think outside the box. I built the damn box, reinforced it with audit trails, and labeled it in triplicate. For a while, that was enough. My windowless office, my neat pens, my peace. But then Vanessa arrived, a wrecking ball with a Harvard MBA and a TikTok smile. She took one look at my shelves and called them the landfill. I didn't care if she liked me. I just needed her not to tamper with systems that kept us from imploding. But of course, she couldn't resist smashing what she didn't understand. She came from a world where perception outranked precision. One day, she reframed an overdue vendor audit as a strategic delay. Strategic delay? That audit was a ticking bomb. The vendor's SOC2 cert had expired mid-year. Missing compliance evidence meant breach exposure. Fines that started in 6 figures per day. When I explained that calmly with printed proof, she smirked. "Rachel, this is why compliance people seem rigid." I wasn't rigid. I was right. After that meeting, HR started checking in. Little emails about adapting to new leadership styles. Translation: smile or disappear. I began backing up my notes, on paper, not digitally. I knew how easily version control could be updated. So I rebuilt my binders by hand. Every deviation Vanessa pushed for optics tucked neatly inside. The tension thickened. When I walked into meetings, the air changed. The truth makes people itch. One Thursday, Vanessa stopped by my cubicle, holding a lavender macaron and an oat milk latte. "You know," she said, "some people just don't evolve with the company." I looked her dead in the eye. "And some people think evolution means repeating the dinosaurs' mistakes." Her smile sharpened. "Cute." That was when I knew I wouldn't last. But she didn't know what I had. What she mocked as clutter was insurance. The binder wasn't just paper. It was the only full copy of our exception remediation trails. Proof of every skipped test she'd buried. And per clause 5.2 of our master contract, missing control evidence during an audit triggered $100,000 per day fines. I never mentioned it. Let her shine. Let her highlight her empire of shortcuts. I'd written the rules she was about to break. The next meeting proved it. Vanessa drummed her acrylic nails on the glass table. "Let's delay the vendor audit to Q4, she said. "It'll streamline procurement comms." I looked up. "That vendor handles encrypted client data. Their access logs flagged inconsistencies last quarter." She waved a hand. "We've had feedback our constant audits slow the business. This isn't a police state." I flipped to tab 6. Per clause 5.2, delay without cause constitutes breach. Her smirk faltered. "You're very thorough," she said, "but you need to think bigger." "Bigger than non-compliance?" I asked. Laughter rippled, fake, and thin. I wrote down her exact words and date. Page 173. Risk escalating. By 2:15 p.m., my Outlook pinged. HR Touchpoint 302 us. Bring your objectives. I walked in to find 2 HR reps already waiting, all pastel smiles. Just checking if you're aligned, one said. Aligned with what? Our evolving culture. I smiled back. Culture doesn't replace controls. Silence. They scribbled something anyway. When I left, I could feel it, the shift. I was being erased in real time. When I got back to my office, the air felt heavier, like even the fluorescent lights had started watching. I closed the door and pulled out my red binder, the contingency one. Inside were printed copies of our SOC2 prep plans, vendor control mappings, and most importantly, every single email Vanessa had sent, dismissing compliance checks as process theater. I didn't have to hack or snoop. She practically BCC'd the whole planet. I started tabbing pages, but this time, it wasn't about neatness. It was about defense. Because in corporate America, the moment they start calling you rigid, what they really mean is, we're building your exit deck. By Friday morning, my computer began acting like it had a pulse of its own. Access denied, drives missing, shared folders, gone. It said it was just system maintenance. Sure. My manager's email bounced back, on sabbatical until next quarter. Cute. That's when I knew the train had left the station and my name was still tied to the tracks. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, there was a note on my monitor. Vanessa wants to see you. Conif Room B. No subject, no explanation, no escape. When I got there, the door was already open. Always a bad sign. Vanessa sat at the head of the glass table, all smug serenity, flanked by Trent from legal and Lisa from HR. Around them, department heads stared at their tablets like a firing squad pretending to read. Rachel, Vanessa began, with that voice syruped in fake empathy. Thanks for coming on such short notice. I sat down, hands folded, no smile, no small talk, just quiet war. She launched into her script. After a strategic review, we're restructuring the compliance department. Translation: you're out. Your role will be sunset effective end of business today. We appreciate your years of service and wish you the best. Sunset. Like it was a spa treatment, not an execution. I didn't argue, didn't flinch. I just stood, nodded once, and walked out while everyone tried not to breathe. The hallway felt endless. I reached my office, shut the door, locked it, and sat. For a long time, I just stared at the binder, the one she mocked, the landfill. What she didn't realize was that every skipped control, every forged signature, every delayed vendor test lived in there, and per our MSA, failure to produce that evidence during an audit was grounds for a $100,000 daily penalty. The kill switch. I packed slow. My plants, my scarf, my coffee mug with the fading world's okayest employee logo. Laptop stayed. Let them think they'd reclaimed something. The binder slid into my tote between a granola bar and a scarf. As I hit the elevator, I caught Gary from finance whispering into his phone. Yeah, she's leaving, binder and all, ding. The doors closed. I smiled. At home, I spread the binder across my kitchen table like a general reviewing maps. Page 92, skipped vendor audit. Page 144, her email. We can always fake a trail later. Page 173, her quote about paranoia. I poured wine, took a sip, and waited. Because next week was audit week. The one Vanessa had delayed. The one with the 100K day clause. Monday arrived like Judgment Day. The external auditors from Halpern and Gray walked in. Navy blazers, black laptops, zero humor. Derek, the new compliance lead, barely out of grad school, was sweating through his collar. Let's start with control confirmations and exception logs. said Beth, the lead auditor. Sharp, surgical, all business. Derek fumbled. Sure, yeah, just a sec. Click. Buffer. That's weird. It should be under Compliance 2023 Q2. Beth tapped her pen. It's not. Silence. Maybe internal archive? Click. Access denied. You did receive our readiness binder request, correct? Beth asked, flat. Derek nodded too fast. Yes, of course. We had, turnover. Noted, she said, and wrote something down. Translation. The scope just expanded. Clause 8b. Material obstruction. Each day without documentation, $100K fine. And that binder, the real one, was sitting quietly on my dining table, between a dying fern and a cold mug of coffee. By Tuesday morning, panic was spreading like spilled ink. The IT team tore through every server, every backup vault, and every shared drive. Nothing. No remediation notes, no signed test logs, no vendor attestations. Just gaps, like someone had tried a selective wipe and failed halfway. I didn't have to be there to see it. My phone buzzed with messages from old coworkers. Hey, they can't find your binders. Vanessa looks ready to chew drywall. Beth's escalating the audit. I stirred honey into my tea and smiled. Vanessa tried to bluff it out. We're just reorganizing permissions, she told the auditors. Beth raised an eyebrow so sharp it could cut glass. Turnover doesn't erase signed logs, VP Holloway. Someone needs to produce them. Trent, our legal liaison, was sweating through his tie by then. He whispered frantically to Vanessa in the hall, like someone pleading with a storm. I wasn't there, but Jess from HR texted. They think you took the docs. Vanessa apparently told the board I'd hoarded paper like a paranoid librarian. Maybe. But at least my library was organized. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the binder open under soft light. Page 127. Vendor clears login anomalies deferred by Vanessa's verbal override. Evidence missing. Cross-reference note, unsigned internal test form. Legal follow-up. Must be signed or documented as gap. It wasn't. None of it was. They thought I'd stolen something. I hadn't. I'd preserved the only record that still existed. By Wednesday, Beth was done playing polite. She sent a formal notice expanding the audit to 2 full fiscal years. Clause 8b's clock was bleeding money now. $100,000 a day, ticking in real time. By Thursday, HR's tone softened. Hope you're doing well, read the email. No mention of the audit, just the corporate equivalent of fishing with honey. I didn't reply. Let them sweat. Inside Stratwell, the meltdown hit full symphony. Derek, poor soul, was pacing conference room A like a man awaiting trial. We'll find it, he kept saying. Vanessa snapped back. Just recreate it. Beth, of course, heard that. You plan to backdate audit evidence? She asked, her voice calm and lethal. Vanessa backpedaled instantly. No, I mean reconstruct. That's not how compliance works, Beth replied. That's how fraud starts. Trent's voicemail hit my phone that afternoon, tone suddenly soft. Rachel, listen, if you could just help us verify which files you might still have, we can make this right. Maybe even discuss reinstatement. Reinstatement. Funny word for someone who'd been treated like disposable wallpaper. I didn't call back. I sipped my wine instead, watching the Chicago skyline bleed orange into dusk. They still didn't understand. It wasn't about the files. It was about the logic. The chain of reasoning only I knew how to follow. I hadn't built a system. I was the system. Friday morning, 10:04 a.m. Sharp. The storm broke. Beth walked into the boardroom with a red-tabbed envelope, always red for blood. She laid it on the table. Per clause 8b of your master services agreement, she said evenly. Your firm is now in material breach for failure to produce certified internal control documentation. Penalties will accrue at $100,000 per day, retroactive to day one of audit delay. Jess texted me seconds later. Beth just dropped the bomb. CFO turned gray. Trent almost choked. Vanessa tried to pivot mid-collapse. We can still rebuild the logs, she stammered. We'll simulate the trail. Beth stared her down. You mean fabricate records? No, remediate. Vanessa's voice cracked. Reconstruction. VP Holloway, Beth said, attempting to reconstruct missing evidence without disclosure escalates this to reportable fraud. The room froze. The smell of panic travels fast in corporate air conditioning. By lunchtime, the rumor mill was wildfire. 3 major vendors had already paused projects. 2 others filed formal information requests under breach clauses. Jess texted, CFO's losing it, outside counsel's here, Vanessa's still pretending it's fine. I took another sip of tea and flipped the binder shut. Let them keep spinning. The fine was ticking. The clock was mine. By Monday, the panic had matured into full-blown chaos. You could practically hear the money bleeding out of Stratwell through the phone lines. HR group chats went silent. Finance stopped joking. Legal started triple-checking their caffeine intake. I didn't even need to call anyone. Updates found me. Jess messaged, Beth's bringing in outside counsel, another from Derek. They're asking about your reconciliation matrix. I told them I don't know how it worked. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Inside the building, Derek was pacing again, muttering redundant backups under his breath. Vanessa, ever the performer, was still trying to act composed. She told the board, everything is recoverable. We'll reconstruct from cloud redundancy. Beth just looked at her like she'd suggested fixing a jet engine with glitter glue. Redundancy doesn't recreate missing internal logic, she said. Someone deleted live evidence. You don't get that back with a sync. Trent, meanwhile, had taken up residence in the corner, refreshing his email like a gambler waiting for salvation. That night, the second voicemail came in. Rachel, Trent said, his voice frayed. We're facing serious exposure here. If you'd consider assisting with reconstruction, the board's willing to discuss compensation, or even reinstatement. The irony almost made me laugh. The same people who'd called me rigid were now begging for the rigidity that kept them alive. I poured myself a glass of Merlot and stepped outside to my balcony. The city hummed below, oblivious. They were asking the wrong question. They wanted to know where the files were. They should have asked who was the system. Tuesday morning, 10:04 a.m. Again, Beth delivered her second red envelope. I wasn't there, but I heard everything later. Effective immediately, she said. Halperin and Gray will escalate breach classification. Daily fines stand. External counsel notified. The CFO apparently went pale. Vanessa tried to pivot again. We'll re-establish control logic. But Beth cut her off. Control logic doesn't re-establish itself, Ms. Holloway. You terminated the architect. By noon, every vendor on Stratwell's list had either paused or pulled their contracts. Procurement froze. IT locked down half the servers to prevent further tampering. I got a screenshot from Jess, a message thread titled Fire Drill. Under it, we need her back. The CFO's name was on the CC line. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Jess this time. Vanessa blamed you in front of the board. Didn't land. They're reviewing her leadership role. I smiled into my tea. Natural consequences taste better than revenge. Friday morning came, and with it, the sound of collapse echoing down the executive hallway. No breakfast spread, no smiles, just panic sweat and stale air. Vanessa tried to steady her voice. We've recovered 90% of the logs, she said. Derek, exhausted and hollow-eyed, corrected her. We estimated 90%. 90%. Nothing's reconciled. The CFO looked like he'd swallowed glass. Then from the far end of the table, a whisper. I don't think we can. It was Sophia, the quiet intern who'd once helped me color code binders. Only Rachel knew how the exception chains linked, she said. There's no index. She built it by memory. Silence. Then, Beth closed her audit folder with a loud, deliberate snap. She didn't just quit, Beth said. She took the thread, and now the whole sweater's unraveling. She reached into her bag, pulled out another envelope, and set it on the table. Clause 8b doesn't only cover missing evidence, it covers the failure to retain the logic that created it. The fine stops when she returns. Those words rippled through the boardroom like a seismic wave. Jess texted me seconds later. You're trending in internal chat. CFO's pacing, Trent's on the phone. I looked out my window, the binder still resting on my table, and whispered. The fine stops when she returns. The irony was perfect. I didn't gloat. I didn't rush. I let them stew, because after all, when you treat competence like clutter, eventually the trash takes you out. By Monday morning, the storm had finally turned inward. The board wanted answers, the auditors wanted signatures, and the lawyers wanted plausible deniability. Everyone else just wanted to survive the week. Jess called at 11:12 a.m., her voice hushed like she was in a church. Rachel, she said, the board would like to speak with you. I didn't say anything. I just stirred my coffee. They're asking what it would take to get you to return, she added. I waited a beat. Did they mention Vanessa? There was a pause. They said they're reviewing her position. Of course they were. I didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just told her, send it through counsel. I'll look it over. Because this wasn't negotiation anymore. It was recognition. They'd built their empire on a framework they never understood because it came from someone who never asked for credit. Now they were paying for that ignorance in $100,000 increments. I let the silence stretch. The fine needed to bleed long enough to make the lesson permanent. That Friday, 9:00 a.m. sharp, I walked back into Stratwell's boardroom, not as an employee, but as the person holding the detonator. No security escort, no hesitation. Just me, calm as a ledger. The room was full. CFO Eric looked like he hadn't slept in days. Trent from legal leaned against the far wall, pale and sweating. Beth sat at the head of the table, laptop open, expression carved from marble. And there, near the middle, Vanessa, still pretending to be in control. Her blazer was gray this time, but her eyes were pure panic. Rachel, she began, forcing a smile that cracked at the edges. I'm so glad you're here. We've all agreed there's been a misunderstanding, and if you're willing to work with... Stop, Beth said, not even looking up. One word, sharp as a gavel. Vanessa froze mid-sentence. Beth nodded toward me. Ms. Price, the floor is yours. I didn't take the empty seat they'd left at the end. I walked straight to the center of the table, placed a sealed envelope down, and said, These are my terms. No fluff, no apology. Just facts. I opened it, pulled out a single page, and slid it across. The list was clean and final. Full reinstatement with retroactive pay, total autonomy over compliance operations, direct reporting line to the board, not an EVP, and termination of VP Vanessa Holloway within 7 days. No reassignments. No soft exits. Out. The room went still. The CFO blinked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Trent opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Beth broke the silence. I've reviewed this, she said, turning to the board. If Ms. Price returns under these conditions, Halpern and Gray will freeze the daily fines immediately. The chairman, an older man with the expression of someone who'd seen a dozen careers die in that room, nodded. Accepted, he said, just like that. Clean, surgical, irrevocable. Vanessa erupted. "You can't be serious!" she snapped. "You're letting her blackmail the company." She took internal documentation. "I retained control logic I authored," I replied, my tone calm enough to sting. "Your team deleted the originals I warned you about. This is a hostile takeover," she hissed. Beth stood, slow and steady. "Ms. Holloway, if you interrupt again, I'll document it as obstruction." Vanessa froze. Her voice vanished. The room watched her shrink in real time. I sat down finally, my binder resting in front of me like a verdict. For the first time in 7 years, I was the one running the table. Eric cleared his throat. "How soon can we restore operations?" 72 hours, I said, "once I revalidate the logs and rebuild the reconciliation map." Beth nodded. "Upon her reinstatement, fines will cease as of tomorrow." Vanessa didn't wait for the rest. She packed her tablet, gathered her pride, and walked out. No goodbyes. No sound but her flats against the tile. Quiet, defeated punctuation. I didn't turn to watch her go. Some endings write themselves. 3 days later, I walked through the glass doors of Stratwell Dynamics again. Same building, same badge photo, completely different reality. The receptionist, Ashley, actually stood up when she saw me. "Welcome back, Ms. Price," she said, her tone somewhere between awe and relief. My office door had been freshly painted, nameplate gleaming. Rachel Price, Director of Compliance. No dotted lines, no middle managers, no VP hovering above. Just me. The desk held new markers, fresh notebooks, and a chair that didn't squeak, a small miracle in itself. And in the center of it all sat the box. My binder. Returned, spotless, reverently placed. No one dared touch it. I ran my hand along the spine, feeling every indentation, every tab that had once been treated like clutter. Now it was sacred text. Beth stopped by just after noon, carrying a slim audit packet. "Figured you'd want to close this out personally," she said, dropping it gently on my desk. "We paused rollback until you confirmed the exception trails." I smiled. "They're already updated. Vendor Clear's SOC2 chain is verified. The evidence crosswalks are restored." Beth gave one of her rare smirks, the kind auditors reserve for a clean kill. "Good. I'll mark the breach closed." She didn't linger. Professionals never do. At 2:17 p.m., Trent appeared at my door, half in, half out, like a man afraid to trigger a trap. "So, we're good now?" he asked, voice tight. I tilted my head. "Define good." He laughed nervously. "You know, operation stable, audit satisfied, the board breathing again." I flipped open the binder to the first page. Q1 Remediation Summary, Risk Tiered, Annotated. "This is version 1, I said evenly. "I'm building version 2, digitized, encrypted, schema isolated, and cloud independent." Trent blinked. "You're rebuilding the system?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "I'm fortifying it." He nodded, slowly backing out of the doorway like a man realizing he'd just met the person who holds his professional oxygen. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the blinds when I saw her. Vanessa, or what was left of her. Gone were the stilettos and power suits. She wore flats and a wrinkled cardigan, clutching a cardboard box of trinkets that once screamed ambition. An award plaque, a dying succulent, a glitter pen. She passed my door without looking up, but I stepped into the hall anyway. Not to gloat. To finish the story. She stopped when she sensed me behind her. No words yet. Just that silence between consequence and acknowledgement. I didn't raise my voice. "Next time," I said, calm and clear, "don't touch what you don't understand." Her shoulders stiffened. Then she kept walking, heels silent, future erased. I watched until the elevator closed, then went back inside. The office felt different now. People spoke softer, not out of fear, but respect. Even the air seemed steadier, like the building itself had recalibrated around order. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began transcribing the binder. Line by line, every clause, every test, every audit trail. Not for them this time. For me. Because survival was never the goal. Ownership was. They'd built Stratwell on a skeleton I designed and buried me under it. But the moment they tried to erase the framework, the bones remembered who made them. At 5:47 p.m., Jess knocked softly. "Board just approved your reporting structure," she said, handing me a folder. "Direct line stays permanent." "Oh, and they're reclassifying the compliance program under your name. It's being called the Price Protocol." I laughed, just once, sharp and quiet. "Clever," I said. They finally put a name on what they tried to destroy. When the lights dimmed and the building emptied, I stayed a little longer, binder open, pen moving fast. For the first time in years, there was no one to talk over me, no one to silence the truth. Policy wasn't paperwork. It was power, and now it belonged entirely to me.